we'll start with the gentleman in the front. So please go ahead.
Thank you, Nozi. My name is Suren Govender, and I'm from Accenture. I have a question for Rapalang. I think we all recognize the exponential value that innovation can bring to society, business, the continent even. Are you aware, or are you busy with extremely innovative ways of teaching innovation? Because I think that that's a skill set, and we spoke about many other skill sets, but that's a skill set that we could do more of.
Sure. Teaching innovation, that's a fantastic question. So let's take the next question from the floor before we come back. Please go ahead, ma'am.
Hi, it's Catherine Glicksman from Thomson Reuters. My question, and I know it should be focused on one person, but it's actually for the panel, is I'd like to know the relationship between innovation, entrepreneurship, and funding. Because a lot of people want to be entrepreneurs, come up with great ideas, but they can't get them further than an idea for many reasons.
Fantastic. Thank you, Catherine. So let's take those two questions. I mean, I think one directly put to you, teaching innovation, and a very, very important question given you being the founder and CEO of Rekindle Learning. So just give us a sense of that.
As an entrepreneur, from my perspective, I try to, and when I do a lot of talks to young people, I really try to break down that innovation concept so that it's not something that you're only qualified to do at a certain point. And we can always look around you wherever you are. You see challenges and problems all the time. But the mindset of most people is that you have to accept that problem as it is, and this is just how life is. And innovation really starts with having a conviction around a point of view that this doesn't have to be like this. And if people actually follow through with those convictions, they start exploring how to find solutions. They start exploring how to solve those challenges. And when we teach innovation, we're really needing to teach people how to trust their intuitions, their insights, to keep exploring it. Because we've all thought of great ideas, but we shut them down because, you know, it sounds too complicated, it's not socially appropriate to think about it, it doesn't sound like a great idea. And until we build a greater self-belief in pursuing those subliminal thoughts and ideas, people won't be able to tap into their real innovation potential. So not necessarily teaching it in my personal capacity now, but that's certainly what I talk about when I talk about entrepreneurship, that it's solving the problems that are relevant to you. And your point of view on that problem is actually the most valuable thing to it, not your level of skills and funding and expertise, because that's what my journey has shown.
That's a really important insight. I mean, I'm sure you want to weigh in on that.
Well, I mean, this is really a very important part of the whole conversation around innovation, and we need to demystify it. So the guy I like the most is the Jack Ma, the founder of Alibaba. So if you follow his story, says he was in America, didn't know anything about computers. He just knew that this thing about the internet, after his friend told him about this, was something that can allow you to interact with people from different worlds. And his curiosity was that he went onto the internet and he searched for Chinese beer. And he couldn't find any Chinese beer on the internet, and he then decided, there's an idea here. I could actually make Chinese product available to the rest of the world. He built an e-commerce platform. Today is worth over $2 billion or whatever, $200 billion, okay? So a teacher that didn't know anything about the internet, so he's not one of those guys who went to the San Jose University or whatever, or MIT or whatever. He saw a gap in the market and said, I could use this thing called the internet, which he didn't even know what it was. So he did some research and he said, there's plenty products in China. There must be plenty people who want Chinese products, and I can create the thing in there. And today he's one of the richest guys. Same thing with the Airbnb founders. They were looking for accommodation. They couldn't find accommodation. And then they rented people's garages to sleep in and oversubscribed the conference that they wanted to attend. And the idea was, there must be plenty people who have got extra spare rooms that they don't know how to get people to access the extra spare rooms. And today they've got more hotel rooms or more accommodating rooms than any one of the major hotel chains. Small idea. It's not anything, like they invented anything from the ordinary. They are addressing a need that they understood on the basis of a challenge they had. Now think today in Africa, how many problems or how many deep-seated issues and challenges do we have today? That if all of us were to just challenge ourselves, as Rapalang says, the subliminal things that sometimes we think is socially inappropriate or is just inappropriate generally, there lies in an idea that could create a trillion-dollar business.
And so if we were to take your response and the insights that Rapalang gave us, and back to Brian's point about restructuring, and I think it was Valai as well, how do we restructure corporate cultures and the way businesses are structured so that even within the business, people are thinking in that entrepreneurial way about how do we solve a problem from where we sit. Again, just Brian, a quick comment on this one, whether you get a sense that we're thinking about it the right way in terms of nurturing entrepreneurs from within so that they want and seek the ecosystem outside of their own four walls.
I think firstly the question around the link between innovation and entrepreneurship is a great question. And essentially they're two lenses onto the same issue. Now what's interesting, if you speak to most big corporates around the world, they'll say an entrepreneurial culture is something they want to drive. And what do they actually mean by that? It means they want people that are passionate about an idea, that are open-minded, that are empowered and committed to make it happen, and actually then have the perseverance to go through and follow through and make it happen. That is, I think you'd agree, those are some of the descriptors of being an entrepreneur. Corporates need that as much as a startup needs it. What we need to do is find ways that we can infuse that culture into large corporates through a process of open innovation, through dealing with startups, through more exposure to them. But the issue of funding, where, I think part of the issue with funding, I admit South Africa's angel capital market, the venture capital market, is not as well developed as it is elsewhere. But I think it's also about the ability to get a credible business plan. And I think that's where we can help people to take an idea into a credible business plan. Because once you got that, I think funding is a whole lot easier.
Your comments on the funding issue, and I'll come to you again, Rapalang.
Yeah, I think the funding issue is really related to what are we looking the funding for, right? So usually you find yourself in a situation where you have potential entrepreneurs with brilliant ideas, but it's just the idea, right? There's nothing behind the idea that can support the investment decision. And that's where the ecosystem becomes important. The Airbnb idea, for example, 10 years ago, somebody could have had the same idea wouldn't have been able to actually implement because the technology or the infrastructure wasn't there yet. Today, the good thing about, Rapalang was telling about your authentic drive, your authentic, need. What open innovation did today is to enable the simple person, somebody sitting somewhere in the street, but having the technology to actually move from the idea to a very rough concept, but to a product. You can code something, you can create, or you can find somebody somewhere to actually help you build a prototype very, very quickly. If you have a prototype and you go out to look for investors, it's very different from just coming and saying, I have this brilliant idea, I'm looking for money. So that's a journey that is changing completely the way we are approaching innovation. Now, internally, I think it's important. Internally, there's a lot of changes that are happening to actually drive innovation internally. One is the concept of experimentation, an agile approach to development, right? So, which is just it's really new technology, new processes, new operational processes that companies are adopting. But some companies go further than that. Is to create a new, even the way you mapping your working space can drive innovation. So on the 6th floor in Barclays Tower North, there was a co-working space that was created just to drive people from different parts of the bank, put them in the same location, and you see how quickly you start developing and producing results.
So even ergonomics within the corporate space can lend themselves to co-fostering open innovation. Rapalang, let me get your comment, and
Sure. In terms of funding, I think it's very important as an entrepreneur to really articulate the fact that South Africa or most African markets don't actually have a venture capital market. There's funding available, yes, in some of these sort of corporate ecosystems that come up, but we need to address that we don't have a venture capital market. Most investments are post-revenue, post-traction, proving the value proposition. And there's a massive gap there. And I think I've seen a lot of government programs and other sort of agencies that set it up, but we continue to mismanage those kind of projects because ultimately the people that run them have never been entrepreneurs and they've never created this kind of early stage value. And we need to take some lessons from other countries like Israel that just started its venture capital market only 20 years ago and how they incentivized international companies to come in. They provided tax incentives and mitigated the risk of bringing in the capital there to start the venture capital market there and transfer skills locally. And they didn't lie to themselves about the fact that we don't have venture capital skills, so we need a program to build it in instead of continuing what we're doing where we lose a lot of money in early stage investments in most of the projects that are happening.
Well, maybe we need to give our government a bit of airtime here. I know that they have created a tax break structure now that if you are private sector investors and you put your money under what they call Section 12J or something, you effectively can get 40% tax break on that at an individual level if you're working through a venture capital company. Now think about this. This is actually quite good because what it does now is that if you have disposable income, you could put that through a venture capital and you could save 40% of that, which is basically refunded to you through your tax. So we are at the early stages of government trying to create incentives for individuals to put their money in there, like high net worth individuals. Right. And that's where the early startup funding is actually going to happen. It's about family trusts that have got money and they can put money and they can take early stage risk. That part is not as developed as it should be, but there are people who play in that space today who tell you that you bring a good idea and the idea has got some element of a prototype or some clients behind it, you are going to get some. So I don't want us to live here thinking and telling people that you can't get funding. I think the issue is that, number one, I find a lot of people struggle with, I've got a brilliant idea, but I don't want to share it because if I do, they'll steal it.
Absolutely.
So I want to say to people, as soon as you have that kind of fear with your brilliant idea, it's worth nothing. It's absolutely worth nothing. So just forget it, Just tell yourself that, sure, brilliant idea is never going to get you anywhere. So there's always ways you can protect a brilliant idea. If it's really authentic and it's brilliant, no one can steal it from you.
Is the first step IP? Is the first step licensing your idea? How do you, if I was an entrepreneur with the real fear that my brilliant idea is going to be sucked up by a Barclays and they're going to make gazillions of money from it and I'm never going to make any money from it. What's my first step? How do I think about this?
Idea. First step is to test your idea. Yes, is to test if your idea is really an idea. Because sometimes we have this concept that I've got this idea that's going to make me a trillionaire, and actually it's an idea that is already there and has no market. So the first port of call is I have an idea, test your idea. And you test your idea by going to Brian and say, Brian, I have this idea, and Brian tells you, no, this idea sucks because 15 other people already do it, Sure. This is how you test the idea, just by having a conversation with people that you can trust, with family, with potentially people that can buy. You don't have to give them the secrets of how you're mixing the cocktail to get to that thing. But there's a lot more ways that you can test ideas out there with the people potentially who can use it.
Okay, so let me follow up with body language. So, Valai, I think you really want to come in.
I really like the idea about, your idea is just an idea and it's worthless until you really make something out of it. Yeah. And I work a lot with entrepreneurs every day, and the first thing I tell everyone is, you know what, your idea is, if you think that you're creating something new, you're dead wrong from the beginning. Anything that you think of now, somebody somewhere in the world has already thought about it. Exactly. The difference between you and that person is what spirit do you have to take it from where you are today to bring it to something that is viable. And the step for that is you challenge your idea. You go, you talk to people. And the idea you start with and the idea you end up with is really like day and night. Yes. It's really the same.
Okay, so Rapeleng, I know you want to say something, but I want you to also comment on the role of universities. I mean, we spoke a little bit about how do you teach innovation, but institutions that should really be the hubs of research and development and should really be churning out our researchers and our scientists and our players in this ecosystem. What's your assessment about what that ground looks like in South Africa?
Sure. To finish up the prior discussion, I certainly do agree that, and what I like to say is that if you're worried that your idea is going to get stolen when you go to market, then the day you launch, it's already stolen. So you might as well pack up that business. And until you've actually really gone into very much deep into the value proposition, you're not going to find a sustainable advantage. Right. And it's up to you as the entrepreneur to really push for that. In terms of what higher level education institutions and universities are doing, I find that there's still a big disjuncture between, for example, I went to a great university here and there's still very little link to that university to support innovations, to bring you back to help other entrepreneurs build up their businesses there. I don't think university alumni and universities that they are now are really gearing you up to focus you on startups. It's still the exceptions that will go into their own business right after university. And we need to change that up quite a bit. What often happens at universities, especially in your final year, is that most of the graduation programs or most of the things that are happening that are talking about post-university are regarding getting employed and getting employed into a blue chip company and pursuing a career there. And no one's talking to you about, you could start this kind of business, what are you really interested in? And that's the dynamic that sort of has to change. And I think a lot of university graduates struggle with that because they feel like if I go to this blue chip company, you know, I get into a graduate program, it's guaranteed, it's established. Right. And with entrepreneurship, there's no welcome mat, there's no welcome day that you're now starting this thing, and you need to prepare them mentally to be able to consider that option. And right now, it's just not happening.
Absolutely. And Brian is an extension of that collaboration amongst universities, because I mean we are speaking about breaking down whatever silos that do exist. What needs to happen for us to do this increasingly?
I think it's collaboration between universities, but also collaboration with business. Yeah. It's interesting, I've been speaking to some of the universities recently about the idea of digital business. And whilst there's huge bodies of knowledge on traditional financial management and strategy and marketing, you name it, there's reams of textbooks written on that. The accepted view is that the textbook on digital business hasn't yet been written. So there's a lot of work, I think, in academia to understand it better, and in the business schools to actually consolidate it and actually formulate some ideas about how to take that to the market.
William, as a final question, just for you to give us your sense on the future of open innovation for this continent and for South Africa, not only in terms of what it can do in the marketplace for business, but also in the broader societal space. Why is this an important conversation for us to have today?
Well, let me steal something from, I think, Samil Ismail, who wrote the EXO, Exponential Organizational book. So what I like about what he said is that you need a massive transformative purpose. So I think corporate South Africa or corporate Africa requires a massive transformative purpose. So we need to realize that where we are today, we have a great opportunity to transform the continent, and we can do it ourselves, because if we think about the theory of abundance, which Peter Diamandis talks about, is that we literally have all the resources and the capability and the technology to be able to effect the change we want today, right? We can do anything in medicine today because we've got exceptional computational power at our fingertips today. So it's no longer like so very expensive. We can connect professors from one area to another who specialize in niche areas so easily today for them to collaborate, to be able to, you know, to come up with nanomedical technologies that can help solve some of the really innate problems that we have. But we require to think in a very transformative way. And we need to think about the greater purpose of what, as organizations, large corporations, our reason to exist, and what is it that we want to be able to do. And once we start thinking about that, and once we spell it out very nicely, of course he uses two sets of acronyms. One is we need ideas, and we need to combine the ideas with scale. And inside there he talks about, obviously, the need for us to talk about an ecosystem and to integrate the ecosystem, to co-create, but to change internally the mechanisms of our businesses to adopt an experimentation culture. And you know, and the culture to say, I don't have to own it all, I can get it from other people who exist in the ecosystem to make myself better. That's how we are going to see exponential growth in the continent.